How many people earn $1 million a year in New Zealand? And what does it take to be in the top 20, 10, 5, or even 1% of Kiwi income earners? Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ed, an economist and property investor here at Opus Partners, and I just got this data from the IRD that breaks down how much money New Zealanders are really making. And some of it floored me. I mean, if you just work a minimum wage job for 40 hours a week, earn $48,000 a year, you're already in the top 60% of income earners. But how can you be ahead of 40% of other Kiwis by just working a full-time minimum wage job? Well, you've got to remember that not everyone works full-time. Some people work part-time. Other people, they might be retired, but they do a few jobs here and there. Then you have people who might be 14 or 15 years old, they work a few hours after school, and maybe there are some kids who have a paper run, but they still pay tax, they still earn an income. And it makes me remember back to my first job. When I first got out of university, I earned $42,000 a year, and that was a little above minimum wage, but not way higher. But at the time, I felt rich because I'd gone from living just off the student loan to earning an income. And look, I definitely agree that the minimum wage, it's not a lot of money. But if you are earning that minimum wage, I think you can feel good that that doesn't mean you're in the bottom 5% of income earners. To get into the top 50% of income earners, you need to earn $58,000 a year. Now, to put that into perspective, let's say you walk into a room and that room holds 100 random working New Zealanders. Well, earning 58 grand a year, that puts you smack bang in the middle. Half the people in that room earn more than you, half the people earn less than you. And I just want to emphasize again, that doesn't mean that the average full-time salary is $58,000 a year. Nope, Stats NZ says it's a bit higher than that. But in this data, we're looking at all income earners, no matter how many hours they work, not just at those who look full-time. And hey, if you like comparison videos like this so you can see how you compare to other Kiwis, do me a quick favor and click the like button. That's how I know what sort of videos I should record more of and what you actually want to see. And honestly, it helps out the YouTube algorithm too. Hitting subscribe, that helps too. We're almost halfway to our goal of growing this channel to 50,000 subscribers. But how much money do you need to earn to get into the top 30% of New Zealanders? About 80 grand a year will do it. And let's say you do earn this income. If you show up to a rugby match at Eden Park, and assuming that the crowd is a perfect cross-section of the country, about 30% of the crowd would earn more than you. And in a stadium of 50,000 people, that's roughly about 15,000 people earning more than you. But the majority, the other 35,000 people, would earn less than you. And look, there's an argument to say, well, why do I even care about this? Why do I care if other people earn more than me or earn less than me? Shouldn't I just be happy with what I've got? I mean, why do I need to worry about keeping up with the Joneses? There are other way more important things in life. And I think that's absolutely true. There is more to life than worrying about how much money you earn compared to other people. But there are two things to keep in mind. The first thing is that people generally want to know how they compare and are they doing well in life, and income and how much I earn compared to other people, that's one measure people look at. So maybe looking at this data will make you think, oh, actually, I'm doing better than I thought, and that makes me value even more what I do have. The other thing is that you often hear this idea that New Zealand is a low-wage economy. But every time I look at these stats, and as you're about to see, there are some really high income earners in New Zealand, and maybe there's more opportunity in this country than you initially thought. Because 20%, 1 in 5 workers earns $97,000 a year or more. That's almost 100 grand. And a lot of people think, well, what does life look like at this point when you're in the top 1 out of 5 income earners in the country? Well, if we think about, let's call it an Auckland couple, call them Sarah and James. They're both in their 30s and work full-time, and they've made it into the top 20% of income earners. Well, they're way more able to live in an area that they want. They might not be in Ponsonby or some really expensive suburb yet, but they can probably find it a bit easier to save for a house. They can get in there quicker and can probably afford to get a mortgage approved from the bank. And they've got way more headroom to put money aside for investments. They're not at the top of the top yet, but they can start planning more for that future. But let's say you want to go further. How much do you need Right now, to get into the top 10% of Kiwi income earners, about $126,000 a year will do it. So 10% of people might not sound like a lot of people, but that's 290,000 Kiwis who earn over that 125 grand per year. Now, imagine all of these high income earners decide to move to the same city. That new city would be New Zealand's third largest, bigger than Wellington City and Hamilton, but a bit smaller than Christchurch. And if you zoom out globally, this theoretical city of high income earners, 290,000 odd of them, it's actually not far off from the entire population of a small country like Iceland. Now, to join the top 5% of Kiwi income earners, you've got to earn about $159,000 per year or more. That's a total of 146,000 people. And because we're talking about the top 5% of income earners, you might be like, 159 grand a year, these people are rich. Well, not necessarily. So at my company, Opus Partners, around 14,000 Kiwis have come in to get financial advice and talk about investing in property. And through that, they often share their money data with us so we can help them figure out what they want to do. Now, when I go through and analyze that data, you often see that high income earners, well, they're not always rich. And that's because being rich isn't about what you earn, the income you've got coming in. It's about what you own and the assets that you control. And one of my favorite examples of this comes from Property 101, which is a book by Matthew Gilligan. He's a property accountant in Auckland. And in his book, he tells the story of Harry the truck driver who earns a pretty modest income. He understands the property market. He's a pretty forward thinker. And back in the 90s, he bought his first home in Otahuhu in Auckland, which is a pretty modest suburb. Now, after a few years, that property had increased in value. So he goes back to the bank. He uses that extra wealth to buy a second property. And over the next decade or so, he goes on to buy another 4 more properties. So by the time he wants to retire, he's got 6 houses. They've all gone up in value and he retires well. But compare that to Philip, who is Harry's lawyer. Now, he's on a very, very high income. He'd be in the top 1% club, earning 400 grand a year. He also bought his first home in the 90s, but instead of buying in a more modest suburb, he spends 4 times as much money and buys a big expensive house with a big expensive mortgage. Now, over the years, he's been diligently paying that off because that's what his parents taught him to do. But for Philip, his house was his saving scheme, so he never bothered saving or investing. But he had a high income, so he paid for his kids to go to private school, he enjoys new cars and lots of overseas holidays. But when it comes to trying to stop working, slowing down or retiring, he had to sell that house and buy a cheaper one to afford it. Now, Philip, the lawyer in this case, earned 5 times as much as Harry the truck driver. He went to university and considered himself a smart man, but he realized he had a lot of clients like Harry who ended up richer than him despite the fact that they earned more modest incomes. But the difference was that they'd invested and they'd invested wisely. So as we go through these levels of income, don't think these people earn huge amounts of money, they must be rich. Because you can earn a big salary, blow it all and not get ahead, and you can also earn less money, invest it wisely and become far wealthier. And just before we talk about how many Kiwis earn over $1 million a year, let's reveal how much do you need to be in the top 1% of income earners in the country. Because to get in the top 1% of Kiwis, you need to earn $270,000 or more a year. And that is a boatload of money. Only 28,500 people in the country earn that or more, and that's roughly the population of Queenstown. I mean, that does mean that these high income earners, the top 1%, could literally populate the whole of that town, and sometimes it feels and seems like they do. But if you're like the 99% of people who don't earn 270K or more a year, that's okay, because most people don't. I mean, I don't earn that much. I'm not in the top 1%. But what you've got to remember is that people often only get into the top 1% when they're really advanced in their careers. Now, I don't have the exact data on who these people are, but you can imagine that most of them have been working for a long time. They've worked their way up the ladder in their jobs and businesses, and are probably managing a team or teams of people. So how many people earn over $1 million a year in salary? Well, can you believe that the first CEO to ever earn $1 million or more in New Zealand was a guy called Craig Norgate. He was the first CEO of Fonterra, and that was back in 2001. But just 24 years after Craig broke that glass ceiling, a whopping 750 Kiwis now earn over $1 million a year, which is 0.03% of income earners. It's a ton of cash. But that number, 750 people, that surprised me. That's more than what I thought it was going to be. And that tells me that it's not just the big bank CEOs or the leaders of the NZX top 50 who earn that $1 million a year or more. And the truth is that that number, 750 people, is probably understated. The actual number is probably higher. And that's because in these numbers, we're just looking at wage and salary income. There might be some people who own a business, and let's call it a big manufacturing company in South Auckland. And they might pay themselves a big salary, but not over $1 million a year. But then they might also earn things like dividends on top of that. And none of that income would be included in these numbers from the IRD. And I always think with this, even though it's kind of fun and interesting to know what income you need to be in the top 20, 10, 5, even 1% of New Zealanders, wherever you sit, it doesn't really matter. Don't feel too bad about it, because if you're in your 20s, you probably don't earn in the top couple of percent of income earners. It takes time to get there. And I also think a big takeaway is you don't need to earn in the top 1% to invest and build wealth for yourself, because it's not what you earn that makes you wealthy, it's what you own.